you put yourself out there. You're on social media. You now teach CCM after you obviously crossed to the dark side. You've gone from high art to low art.
Oh, yeah, that's
Oh,
right word
dare
there.
you, dare you. Have you had anyone try to silence you or tell you what you're doing is unacceptable?
I I don't know that anyone who I respect has ever
Oh, I
done
like
that.
that. I
I'll
like how
put it
you
that way.
framed that. Anyone I respect.
Put it that
Okay.
way.
There's a lot of inverted commas in this
Yes,
conversation.
if you
People
have to
better
read
watch
it.
this on YouTube because
Yeah.
there's a lot of this going on. Sorry, I
Uh-huh.
interrupted you.
A lot of no, it's fine. Um, I do often put up, I often will put up on my social media platforms something a little bit controversial, or I'll put up
Yes.
something that I think is going to, get people talking a little bit
And thinking.
and thinking.
And
Hmm.
thinking. That's what I feel that you do. When you post something, you post it to get people thinking. That's
Yeah.
where I think it's coming from.
Exactly, exactly. And get us examining our own biases and examining our own,
Yes.
where,
Hallelujah.
how, where are those things living in us? And then
Mhm.
how is that affecting your teaching? And how is that then, we so often, I come from an evangelical Christian background, which tends to say that we're all sinners and the heart is desperately wicked and who can know it, and so we need Christ in order to you know come
Mhm.
into grace and all that, and I don't not believe that, but one thing that I have come to as an adult is that we are
Yes.
not all desperately wicked and that we are
No.
and that people are trying, and that people are fundamentally good, and people are fundamentally, trying their best in their situations, right? So that is something that I have come to as an adult, which I think is actually the logical outcome of what I was actually taught when I was in church and as a Christian. I think that the logical outcome of, if you think about those things, I think the logical outcome will actually be that you start to say, well, but people are actually trying their best here. People are actually
Mm.
fundamentally good, right?
Mhm.
Anyway, so that, oh gosh, yes. So when I'm making those controversial posts and when I'm sort of trying to get people to think, I'm hoping that people are going to think about the ways that they teach
Yes.
do not actually line up with their their belief system, or what they
Yes.
fundamentally believe about
Yes.
themselves and about the sinners they
Yes.
work with.
Yes.
So because I think that happens all the time, right, where we teach the way that we were taught, and so we have these judgments, we have these biases, we have these things inside of ourselves that, if we don't examine them, they then actually come out and say things to students that we actually don't actually believe,
Yes.
that are not actually in line with our values.
Mhm.
So I think that is
Mhm.
the main reason that I put those kinds of posts out there, is to
Yes.
just
Yes.
think about that. Do you really
Yes.
actually believe that?
And I like the spirit in which you do that.
Yeah, I mean, we all, well, and also we don't know what we don't know yet. you know, we just
And
don't.
that's
I mean,
fine. And that's fine
yeah, and
though.
we all have our biases, and we all have, we all have internalized stuff. So we just don't know what we don't know yet. So, and um, I think, well, yeah.
That's okay. That's
I
okay.
think, yeah, like I think that that's part of what, again, what those kinds of discussion posts I think do is, and I do live office hours every week as well, where I just go live and talk about stuff, similar to, sort of like a very casual podcast, but
Yes.
and usually what I'm doing in the live office hours has a lot less to do with technique and exercises and like how we should be, doing this or whatever. It's a lot. I mean, every once in a while I'll, talk about belting or mix or something like that, but usually it has everything to do with pedagogy. Like, how are we teaching? What are we teaching? Why are we teaching? How are we working with specific kinds of students? How are we eliciting feedback? How are we drawing attention? What is our language? What is our communication? So, and that all, it almost inevitably comes back to, let's examine what we thought and let's figure out if what we're doing and what we think actually does align with our values. If we say that we're an inclusive voice studio, okay, let's look at our let's look at our attendance policies and see whether those actually align with
our values.
Whether we're, whether I'm an inclusive voice studio or not. Let's see.
Yes.
But we kind of get caught up in the way that my teacher did it, and also we get caught up in
Can I say sometimes? Yeah, but sometimes we can get caught up in what we deem to be privilege.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think people have a sense of privilege.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because of their socioeconomic background, because of their training, the Church of Classical Training.
And classical elitism, as they call that.
Yeah, because of gender bias, so many things. We really have to be careful. And you do, in your posts, you cover so many different topics. I mean, one week there'll be one on breathing, the next week there'll be something on resonance or something on belt or whatever it is. You cover the whole gamut. Is there one thing that you're most passionate about, and you would, if you could create a pet project on that one thing that has to do with technique, what would that be?
Oh, with technique, that's interesting.
Yes, so we've covered all the studio policy stuff. What do you feel most strongly about when it comes to a technical aspect?
I'm not sure that this is going to answer the question that you're asking.
Okay, but that's okay.
But let's
yes.
throw it out there anyway, and you can tell me to clarify if it doesn't.
Okay.
I think the thing that I feel most strongly about when we're talking about technique and when it comes to teaching technique and understanding technique is that we tend to lock ourselves into a binary or a right or a wrong way. We tend to lock ourselves into binary in terms of like, am I in chest voice or head voice? Am I doing this right? Right? We tend to kind of get ourselves locked into these binaries. We want to do things right. We want our students to sing well, and we think sometimes that there's a right and a wrong way. And so, we lock ourselves into these binaries around right and wrong, good and bad, healthy and unhealthy, chest voice, head voice. Like, we lock ourselves into these binaries when there isn't. More and more, I just think there are fewer and fewer things where binary applies, right? Where strict binary applies, like fewer and fewer things in my life as I get older. And so technique and understanding technique, the thing that I work very hard to take out of. Oh, are you okay?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I accidentally hit something. I'm just going to pause it for a second. Are you hearing noise?
I am not.
Oh, excellent. Because all this building noise is going on. Okay, Sorry,
So good.
keep going. No, okay.
The
So,
thing, yeah, it's all good. The thing that I'm working always to kind of combat, if you will, is this idea of right and wrong, good and bad, healthy, unhealthy, like this whole idea, and to take the binary out of it and to instead replace with efficient, inefficient. Is it sustainable or not sustainable? And giving students choices around technique. So what is your what is your desired tonal outcome? And let's base your desired tonal outcome on what you want to say, not on what I think it should sound like. Let's figure out what you want to say, and let's figure out what you have to say. Let's figure out what you want to communicate, and how does that sound in your voice, capital V? What is your capital V voice, right? Let's figure that out together, and then let's figure out what's efficient or less efficient. Let's figure out what's sustainable or less sustainable. Let's figure out what is going to work on a mic or not going to work on a mic. Let's figure out what, and let's just figure that out. So then the student has choices, right? Rather than, oh, I can't do that, it's bad, or I can't do that, I have to do this because it's good. Singers can then say, I know that this sound isn't sustainable over, like an entire set or maybe 3 sets. I know it's not sustainable over 3 sets. So I'm going to judiciously use this sound in like these 3 spots where it's absolutely communicating what I need it to communicate. And the rest of the time, I'm going to do this one that is more sustainable and still communicating what I want it to communicate, or whatever. So students singers, the singers we work with have choices rather than trying to figure out what the right way and the wrong way is.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when we're teaching technique, then, I mean, I even have like a little bit of a philosophical issue with like technique, right? Because it has so much connotation of like right and wrong, right? And like it really has that kind of like connotation. Not that I don't, I mean, I use it and it's fine, but I do also, not necessarily because I think that we shouldn't be using it, but because singers come in and say like, I want to learn good technique. Okay, let's unpack that a little bit.
Yes.
Who told you had to have good technique, right? Like, where does that come from? Why are we thinking that you have to have, quote, good technique?
And why is your technique bad?
And why is your current technique bad, with big quotes around it? Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So when we're talking about technical skills, I try to talk about so much more about, with singers anyway, so much more about, what do you want to say? How your voice respond? How does your body respond to what you want to say and to the emotion that you're bringing, or what you're trying to communicate, or who you're communicating to? And that, if we come back to teachers, then what I'm always trying to work into when I'm training teachers, and what I'm trying to work into, because I teach anatomy and physiology, like I teach that's part of what I teach for sure, and what I work with teachers on. But what I'm always trying to come back to in that training specifically is, I want you as the voice teacher to understand what the possibilities are in terms of the physiology of the voice. Like, what are the possibilities that the voice can do? How does the voice work together efficiently to create specific tonal outcomes? How, like, what can we find, rather than, so like, here's a whole bunch of roadmaps. You just decide where you want to go. There isn't one way to get there, right? So like, here's all the different possibilities, and then you and your student get to decide where you want to go. Like, you don't have to, there's not one map, right? There isn't one right or wrong way.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
And then, yeah, and as I'm teaching and working with voice teachers, inevitably, teachers say things like, oh, this is so validating. So there's information that the anatomy and physiology doesn't become a like stick over their heads where they're like, oh, I didn't know that, I'm such a bad teacher. It becomes, this is so validating to understand that the reason I was using this exercise, or the reason I was working in this way, was because that's how the voice works. Oh, okay. So it becomes this validating process to learn anatomy and physiology, to understand all of the options within the voice, right? So it's validating rather than like painful
Yes.
and regret because I didn't know this sooner. It
Yes.
becomes this thing like, oh, I love that I know this information and this is going to inform my teaching because I have more options, but I wasn't doing a bad thing before, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of takeaways from what you've just said. Firstly, is that when it comes to teaching, a student-centric approach has to be applied in
Mhm.
all cases.
Mhm.
One size does not fit all,
Great.
and there are many ways to skin a cat.
A horrible thing, but yes.
But that's what I've just taken away from, and yes, and I think we do beat ourselves up. And I think over our teaching sometimes, because there are some people when they say or they're endorsing a training approach, or they believe something is the way that it is, they say it with such arrogance, and they have such a presence about them when they say it that they tend to make you feel a little intimidated, and they have you second guessing yourself.
Yeah.
But I've learned now, it's taken me a lot of years, but I've gotten to a place now where I go, well, you know what, that might work for you, but it's not going to work for everybody. And it's like putting people on an eating plan. We're all different. We all have different bodies. We all have different body shapes, different metabolisms, different cultures. We're all different. And you might be able to eat gluten-free and it works really well for you. But like you may have bread, but I can't eat carbs. Or, we just
Exactly.
have, everyone is different. The
Mhm.
instrument, the anatomy is the same, but even then it's not the same because it's all
Well,
different shapes and sizes, and we don't
yeah,
have.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And the way we coordinate is different. So, you know, I mean, I love our colleagues in voice research, and the colleagues who are doing the voice science and really understanding how the voice works to create sounds. And at the same time, I think the disservice or the thing that kind of trickles down sometimes from voice science is that there is a right and a wrong way, right? So that kind of trickles down. Oh, this is how the vocal folds do, blah, blah, blah. But it's not just the vocal folds. This is a complex instrument. It's not just what, this one thing that you study does. It's not just that. It is
Yes.
so much more. It's a complex instrument. And yes,
Yes.
it's completely different from person to person, even though the fundamental anatomy and physiology is the same from person to person. But the way we use it, the muscle structure, the muscle tone, yes, it is very different from person to person.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
I also think there's a philosophical kind of underpinning to Western training in general, or Western education systems in general, but also specifically to Western classical training, where there is this kind of right and wrong way. There is this one size fits all way. And there is this, this very prescriptive kind of way. Yeah, I mean, I have, I've used and discarded textbooks through the years based on that prescription attitude, based on that, like, here is good posture, or here's the best breathing. Well, good posture, we're all compensating for something different in our bodies, in our emotional
Yes.
state. Like, we're
Yes.
all,
Emotions too. That's
yes.
another one, inverted commas. Voice science spectrograms don't show what's going on with the student emotionally. And I think that was one thing that you were alluding to, is that we are human. And with that comes that there's an emotional and psychological aspect to us that a piece of equipment doesn't show, and learning about how something functions doesn't show either.
Yeah, I mean, one example of this is like the recent craze around formants, right? Around understanding formants, and like if you know how to apply formants, blah blah blah, it's gonna blah blah blah. So formants, very interesting and can be very useful if you understand the way formants work. It can be very useful to like incorporate into your teaching and blah blah blah, and that's all terrific. Except that if you're a voice teacher who works with singers to work with them to blend registers, and if your singers sound like they have a similar sound from the bottom of their voice to the top of their voice, if that's what they want, you're working with formants right now. You actually understand formants because intuitively, right? You may not be able to explain them or understand how they actually apply, and that's fine. I do try to explain, but sometimes it doesn't get, it is complicated, and whatever, it's fine. And that is what it is. But like, we get so caught up in this, this concept, and it's got to be right. And if I don't know formants, and if I don't understand formants, then maybe I'm not a good teacher.
Yes, I didn't understand formants, and I still don't completely understand formants. And I think I'm a good teacher. I think it's having a balanced approach, isn't it? For you having that knowledge of voice science, but also knowing how to apply it to a human being.
Yeah.
And knowing that it's not going to cover all bases, that we need to sometimes look at the psyche as well, but that's not our job too.
No.
But we just need to be aware. We need to be aware that there's something more going on with this person, and that's the problem.
Yeah, it's not our job to diagnose. It's not our job to treat. It's not our job, but it is our job to, to treat people like human beings who are doing their best.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
That's our job.
Exactly. If we feel that we want to slap every student that comes into the studio, we've got a problem. As I say, Houston, we have a problem. What's the worst advice you've ever been given, or the worst piece of information that was shared with you, do you think?
Oh, I really don't know. What's yours? What do you think?
Probably what I heard in a couple of weeks ago, which I don't want to share. I thought that was pretty poor advice. And that, okay, actually I will share it, that when you look at a singer, that they should sound how they look. Okay. So it started out, if you have a young person, they should sound like a young person according to the age of that person. Then we escalated to, we have a transgender singer and they present as a female, then they should sound like a female. And I'm going to leave it there.
That's interesting.
And I immediately thought, well, they may not want to sound like a female. First up, we don't know their journey. We don't know at what part of their transitioning they're at.
Well,
and there's so many things that I went, wow. That was a wow.
The only, I think, the part that I could get behind a little bit in that one is that I think we often do children a disservice if we are trying to get them to sound like an adult opera singer, a well-trained opera singer, for example. And that is not because they shouldn't, but because there is a physiological requirement in an adult opera singing voice for a larger vocal tract, for a more well-coordinated, I mean, there are aspects of the
Mm-hmm.
vocal folds that have
Mm-hmm.
not developed yet in children that we need in
Yes.
coordination.
Yes.
So there are things that need to happen in the body in order, it needs to be a mature body in order to create those sounds,
Yes.
and so that would be my only caveat there with that. But like everything else is, I mean, there are women baritones in opera singing world right now. There are, I mean, and I can't remember her name now, but she doesn't want to change her voice. She doesn't want to
Yes.
sound female, quote unquote. She wants to
Yes.
sound the way she wants to sound.
Exactly.
She's working
Exactly.
very successfully as a baritone. Why would she? And so she's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
her
Yes.
pronouns are she, her. So yeah, I mean, that takes the agency away, right? And so I mean, I can see where the intention is good, where you're saying, where you're
Oh,
talking
yes.
to people, right? And I can see
Mm-hmm.
that, but the impact of that is not good because then, and
Yes.
also you set yourself up as the gatekeeper, as the arbiter of what someone should sound like. And I got big quotes on the should again, but
Yes. Yes,
yeah.
exactly. You're starting to impose, and as teachers, we should never impose.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
not about
Yeah,
us. Once again, it's
yeah,
not about us. It's about our
yeah,
student and their
yeah,
needs and listening
yeah,
to them and what their needs are and what they're asking of us and how can we
yeah,
make this work for them in a sustainable manner,
yeah,
is what
yeah,
I think.
yeah.
What do you think is missing at present in terms of higher education training for singers, or not? Or do you think that we're doing well?
Gosh. Well, you and I both have advanced degrees, so obviously at some point we bought into the system, right?
No, I have never bought into the system.
At
I've
some
been
point,
fortunate,
okay.
but
Tell me,
I've been
okay, tell
subjected
me
to
about
the
that.
system.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so
At some point,
I have never had, I had never had a classical singing lesson
yeah,
until last year when I participated in someone's PhD, and they were wanting CCM singers to have classical voice lessons. We got hooked up to the spectrogram before and after, and to see if there were any changes in pitch, range, volume, timbre, all those things.
yeah.
And my argument was I hadn't had voice lessons for a long, long time, and it was pretty intense. And I said, well, how can you prove to me that if I didn't go to a CCM teacher, that you wouldn't have had the same results?
Exactly.
That was
Exactly.
my whole thing. As when I was interviewed afterwards, I said, you can't tell me that that happened because of the classical lessons. It was because I had some training. When I was at the conservatorium studying formally, I did have CCM lessons because we have Dr. Irene Bartlett, who's now
Yes.
an associate professor. So I had training with her. When I first went into academia in 2008, after having a big pop and rock career, and most of the cohort were classical, I was definitely in the minority. I was frowned upon. So when I say I didn't buy into it, I was subjected to it.
Very
And
good.
yes, I was looked down upon by students who had no hope in hell of ever making a cent from the industry. And I'd already had a massive career where I paid off a home, I owned my own car, put my daughter through private school education. And they were like, YouTube moment, you need to see the face. But yeah, so I never bought into it, but I was subjected to it, Shannon. So
Gotcha.
that's, yeah.
I totally hear where you're coming from. not necessarily I think I misspoke there, but what I
Yes.
mean is that we've been in the institution. At
Oh,
some point, we valued the institution enough
oh,
to go
yes.
and get the degree, right?
Oh,
So,
yes,
you know,
absolutely. And I'm very grateful for that. And I absolutely adore my classical
yeah,
colleagues. You know, I
yeah,
have nothing against anybody in the classical world. Honestly, it's not like that. All I'm doing is trying to wave the flag and say, hey, we're legitimate too. That's all
yeah,
I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to advocate for an industry that I've done so well in, that I've had a successful career, and I'm still in the same industry after, I won't say because then I give away my age, and I'm
oh
always
dear.
21.
Yeah,
We're all 21 on this show. But I've been in this industry for over 45 years.
yeah,
Same
yeah,
industry,
yeah,
so I'm just going, you know what, we can make money and we can do well and we can actually be healthy and efficient and sustainable singers doing what
yeah,
we do. And dare I
yeah.
say, making those terrible four-letter word sounds called belt.
I know, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm not sure that I am not sure that the let's say deficits that I think are in the academic system, or the things that are um, not useful for independent voice teachers, for example, in this system, I'm not sure that those things are fixable. I don't know that they're fixable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I mean, that's the reason I'm doing the VoicePed UnDegree, right? Like I don't think that, I think if you, here's my issue. My issue is this, that the academic system promises something it can't deliver, and it makes you pay a lot for it.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
right. So
Yes.
you pay a lot, especially in the States, man. That system
Yes.
is
It's a lot of
so
money.
broken. Oh my
Yes.
gosh, it is so
Yes.
broken.
Yes.
Listen to us just ragging on the States there, but it really is a broken
No,
system.
it is. It is.
It's so much money. And the promises that are made, even, I mean, now I think some of the program at Shenandoah, I think does, can deliver on its promise to a certain extent.
Yes. Yes.
You're getting the training that you need to go into a professional career in music theater.
Agreed.
And so I think, but so that promise is there for maybe, but like, what's that, like maybe 1% of the institutions that, and I'm talking like world over, 1% maybe of the institutions where we're going in hoping to have a career uh, in some kind of performance-based career, you're, that promise is no. I mean, you're lying through your teeth. How many
Yes.
hundreds of thousands of people are paying hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars to be promised that they're going to have a career in classical singing, which is like 1% of all of the musics out there?
Yes. It's,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, that is
Yes.
insanity. It is
Yes.
insanity. What are we promising people? It is infuriating. And like from a voice ped standpoint, we're going into our degrees. Oh, and also let me say that I don't think that academic programs will ever be able to teach CCM. I think of music theaters being separate from CCM, so, or from
Yes.
popular
I
musics,
do
right? I think
too.
of them as being
Yes.
separate.
100%
Uh,
agree.
yeah, so I don't think that popular musics will ever be well taught in an academic program. I don't think jazz is well taught in academic programs. And the reason I think that is because, I mean, jazz may be a little bit better, but popular music's, the way we acquire and learn to sing popular musics is not by learning the technique first. And academic systems are set up to teach you technique first. So that is because I've got a thing that you need to know. And so now I'm going to test you on it. And here are the parameters of your testing. So like, you have to sound like XYZ. You have to make these specific sounds. Well, and okay, but that's not the real world of popular music.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's not how popular music's artists come forward. I mean, that is not how that works. We popular music singers, singer-songwriters, like, and bands, I've got something to say, and now I'm going to figure out how I say it, right? So like, I've got something to say. So, I mean, maybe we can do some courses on songwriting. I mean, that will be
Yes.
bad. And yeah, we can do some courses on you know, sound setup and like optimal mic use. Like, I mean, we can do those kinds of courses for sure, but like teaching singers how to do popular music is not about teaching you how to sing. It's about what do you want to say, and now you become a coach, you're not a teacher.
Yes.
Right? You become a consultant, not a teacher.
Yes.
So I don't think that the academic system is ever really going to be set up well with its need for assessments and grading, and for, you know, and for the professor who knows the information and the student who doesn't yet. Like, that system is not set up to train popular music singers or contemporary singers. It's just not. So
Well,
I'm not sure that it'll ever be that.
Yeah, well, I just want to share something here, because I actually teach at a conservatorium, and I teach popular music singers in that conservatorium. And I 100% resonate with what you're saying. My job is to teach sustainability.
Yeah.
And I work with singer-songwriters, and it is all about finding their most authentic sound in the style that they see that their career paths going along, the music that they are writing, and to teach them to be honest and genuine on stage, and teach them how to open up and share their message and their stories so audiences resonate with them.
I think that is a testament to you as an individual teacher in the system, right? I think there's
Yes,
some
and my
wonderful
performance
teachers.
background.
Yes, and
My
your
performance background
Yep.
100% influences the way that I teach those singers, because I know how audiences work. I know the music industry, but had I done just a PED course, I would not teach the way that I teach. And those students and the people that I work for are extremely grateful that I can deliver that.
Yeah, and that becomes more yeah, I mean, I think too, within Western classical singing, you know, there are individual teachers within the system who are doing incredible work, and who are, you know, like, I absolutely think that. I think the system itself is not set up to
Yes.
create, like, it's the system itself, right? Like, I think there are wonderful teachers in the system who are working in the system, right? Absolutely. But the system itself is so faulty. I just don't know that the system itself is,
Yes,
you know,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, I understand.
yeah. And so I think from a voice ped point of view, so if we're going into a system, we're going into academia to learn you know, how to teach, and because we want to increase our teaching skills, you know, a little bit like what we talked about earlier, I think one of the things that is missing is this, first of all, understanding of what independent voice teachers need. but
Yes.
also
Yes.
this ability to really kind of ask those questions and take apart the biases. I think what happens instead is we get into a voice ped program and we're taught, head down, we're taught head down, and we're taught, or top down, and we're taught through grading and assessment. So the teacher decides what's most important for you to know. And so then the teacher grades you on whether or not you have learned that information. And
Yes,
so
absolutely.
that is, I mean, that's the academic
That's
system,
it.
right? So then
Yes,
we,
absolutely.
yeah, and then we go into our independent voice studios and we think, okay, so I know what the student needs. And so now I'm going to make, I'm going to make goals based on what I think they need to learn. Okay. Or like, so that's what we get from the system, right? That's what we get from that kind of training. And we don't necessarily, I mean, all of the other stuff aside, where we might not be getting information about how to teach like 6-year-olds, or we might not be getting information about, how to teach whatever. We don't get that fundamental philosophical understanding of how we're teaching, right? We don't get that. We
Absolutely.
instead get that top-down understanding of teaching and training. And so then we go into independent studios and we teach just like we were taught in the academic world, even though we may understand voice pedagogy better, right? We may understand all of those things better. I think too, the other thing that is missing in many of our voice ped, and I think this is something that is missing for our industry as a whole, is just like this idea of a practicum, of where we have mentored teaching, it's all good. If obviously we're teaching and there are lots of folks who love their voice lessons and who are getting great voice lessons, that's all good. And at the same time, what I would love to see is more mentored teaching, where we're talking about, hey, why are you using that language? Let's see if there's some other language we could use there. How are you giving feedback here? Let's figure out other ways to draw attention to this. Like, so we're talking about sort of like how to teach, the actual how. Having all of that information is not gonna do you much good if you can't actually, or if you don't understand how we learn.
Yeah. And
So
how do we apply it?
how do we apply it? Yeah, I mean, that's missing. So like, again, that's part of what we're doing in the VoicePed UnDegree is, the lectures are all pre-recorded. So you can watch the lectures anytime you want. And honestly, you can get all of this information on the internet. It's not like I'm teaching something that's like completely like brand new that I came up with. This is all, anatomy and physiology is all over the place, right? You can get it any way
Yes.
you want.
Yes,
But
yes.
it is partially the way that I package it, of course, but that's there. So, but then we're having live discussion time around that information, where we're asking questions, we're doing practical application, and then we're teaching each other and working with each other and working with students, so that we have the practical application of this information. And then, I mean, that's the anatomy and physiology side. And then we're also doing like the how to teach side. We're talking about, like I said, how do we learn? How do humans learn? We're talking about, inclusive voice studios. How do we create more inclusive voice studios? And that's all then part of the practical application. And the other thing we're doing is, we're going to do co-created assessment protocols. So let's decide together what is important for you to learn. Let's decide together what of this information you want to be assessed on your learning of it. And let's figure out together how you want to be assessed. Do you want to be assessed? Like, let's put the grading rubric together. Let's do it
Yes.
together.
Yes. Yes.
Let's figure this all out together, so that I'm not like saying, here's what you need to know, and so here's what I think
No
is most
binary,
important.
no
No,
binary system in your program. You're
no.
actually encouraging people to think for themselves. Yeah.
And to also understand themselves in terms of who they are as learners as well, right? And what kind of, how they process and how they want to learn and how they want to respond to assessments. Do you want to, I don't know, do you want to do a one-on-one interview to like answer this discussion question? Do you want to, how do we want to like, I don't
Yes,
know.
yes, because we all learn differently too. That's the thing. We don't all learn the same way. And you are a lifelong learner. I know that you
That
just,
too, yes.
yes, and you have that curiosity just as I do. I am a highly curious person as well. What's the next thing you would like to learn about? What do you think is missing in your learning right now?
Um, oh gosh, I always have about 1,000,001 books on the go. I never finish books.
Okay.
Very rarely finish them. I'm always like, okay,
Just
I
get
got
what
one
you
of these in
want
my
out of
hands.
them next.
And I'm always listening to 1,001 podcasts, and like it's always that. Um, and I love to learn by uh, I love lecture style learning. I personally love being in a classroom, and
Yes,
especially if it's
yes,
like a discussion, like I love that. So
yes.
if I could do that over a book, I'll do that any day. But currently, what am I looking at really specifically? You know what? I just finished rereading actually Lynn Helding's book um, about what's it called? Musician's brain, the music, and what's it called? The musician's mind. So I just finished reading that one and took a lot of interesting stuff out of there that again was more of a validation of things than really a
Right.
like, oh,
Mhm.
it was more of a like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Uh-huh. Okay. I call it this through observation. That's what I call it. Oh, it's nice to know that there's a real actual scientific word for that. That process actually has a thing. So that's interesting to me, is that learning process. I think the main thing for me right now in terms of what I want to be more clear about and what I want to be able to deliver in a clear way is I'm not a huge fan of these words, but this sort of teaching best practices. I'm not like a huge fan of best practices, but that is kind of
But
where we
we
are
get
right
the
now.
idea.
But yeah, so um, I'm doing a presentation at Nat Chicago with two Canadian colleagues. Ooh, and we're presenting on
Woo!
Canada Day too. What do you know? Um, we'll be in
Go
Chicago on
Canada,
Canada Day. I know. It'll
part
be
of the
good.
Commonwealth.
That's right. So, and we're presenting on the teaching best practices and applying them to the independent voice studio. Uh, so things that you would learn and that you would uh, have to think about if you were doing an education degree. So if you were learning to be a classroom educator, for example, in Canada anyway, if you were doing your teaching degree, there are things that you need to understand, that you need to learn about in terms of assessments, in terms of teacher goals, in terms of developing student-led learning, in terms of
Yes,
universal design, like all of those things that we never hear about in independent voice studios. And so that is part of what I think that is the next thing that's on my plate for sure, is preparing for that. But that's also like a deep abiding interest, something that I very much have been sort of learning about as we go along.
mm-hmm.
And then always, always, always at the top of my priority list is always inclusive voice studios. And that's through a neurodivergent or neurodiversity affirming lens for me, for the most
Yes,
part. But yeah,
yes,
always, always, always that's like,
yes, yes,
how does inclusivity work into our voice studios and what we do in the
yes.
voice studio? Yeah.
And that is something that I would like to talk to you about, but we are running out of time, and I need to have you back for that one because it's something
Sure.
that
Sure.
I really, really want to talk to you about, is that very topic. I, but for the moment, just a couple of last questions. So you have this structured learning, then you have an, I think, kind of the other side of structured learning is methodologies, or are methodologies. What do you think about methodologies?
Ah,
Am I asking? Every
so,
time I ask you something, you're laughing. It's like, oh, this is naughty.
you really want to like, okay, let's do it. Well, I mean, again, I think the issue with models and methodologies is always that we could just fall into this binary again, right? That this is, and this is always the issue with a model as well, where we say, this is the way something works. Well, yeah, in your little tiny scientific like experiment that has no human element, sure. And then here's also your, methodology. So the methodology, I love that I love that we're quantifying things, right? Like humans, we like to quantify. We want to quantify. We want to put a label. We want to figure the thing out. We want to like put it in a box. And so, we understand it. And that is fantastic. And also dangerous, because then we end up with a right or a wrong. So like, if you're doing it this way, then it's wrong. I think what I love about methodologies is that there is usually a principle or guiding factor behind that methodology. Why did we develop that methodology, right? Like, why are we talking about universal learning? Why are we talking about student-led learning? Why are we talking about these concepts? Because there's there's something behind it that we want. So I think if we can keep that thing behind it in mind, and let that be the guiding light as we go through, rather than taking on the methodology as like the one true way. Right?
Yes,
I think
yes,
that's where we
yes,
get into trouble.
yes. Because sometimes it goes back to being a one size fits all. That week
Absolutely.
one, you do this, week two, you do that. And then you have a lot of people that sell these programs for a lot of money. And there are some on YouTube. And when you start to research them, they're really scary. These people really don't know what they're doing. And they're on these big stages making a lot of money, and they almost have like all their disciples. It's scary. Sorry, I make you laugh a lot, don't I? I
I
just
love it. Well, and so I
sorry,
have
Shannon. I don't
no,
want to
and
get
and
sorry. I don't want to get you in trouble. These are my opinions.
oh, good.
This is a disclaimer, back in inverted commas, for Shannon Coates. She did not say this. I said it. So if you're going to stick a pin in a voodoo doll, make sure it's mine and not Shannon's.
No, it's all good, but I think that speaks to a little bit too about, I mean, I get furious and so angry uh, when folks who have a platform and who are positioning themselves as an expert in teaching or voice pedagogy or a specific part of teaching. So when folks who are positioning themselves in that way have a one true method or have the one true way, or who are prescriptive or have the secret, like that is infuriating to me, right? So your average independent voice teacher, if you've got a one true way, I just feel like you just haven't figured it out yet. And that's okay. That's fine. You're not saying that you're you're not trying to like pass your one true way on to like other people and make money at it, right? As soon as you start to like monetize your one true way and put yourself in like the VoicePed like chair, that makes me very, very angry. So yes, I hear what you're saying. It makes me very angry.
And we don't want to get you angry. Watch out.
I don't know.
Watch out when Shannon's angry. She'll be all over Instagram with her anger. No, never. I don't see that. I don't ever see that side of you, to be honest. I don't ever see angry Shannon on Insta.
I have a couple of friends that I rant to, but other than that, yeah.
That's all right. You can rant to me because I'm happy to rant. I rant publicly and it's fine. And whatever I say with love. That's all. I suppose I just want people to be amazing, whatever they do, and comes from the right place. And just everyone just keep their eyes and ears open and their hearts open to other opportunities and other ways.
Yeah,
That's all it is,
yeah,
really. It's
yeah.
not a bad thing. So if you had to offer, this is your final question, Shannon. If you had to offer one piece of advice to our singing voice community, what would that be?
Oh gosh. Well, I think what we've been saying all along, stay open, stay curious, keep examining your biases and see where your information is coming from. See whether the person who the people or the programs that you're looking for are building things for you, for independent voice teachers or not.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Now, Shannon, we're going to share all your links in the show notes. So
Sure.
your voice, what was it? Voice unped? Your unped.
The VoicePed UnDegree.
Oh, the undegree.
Yes.
That's the degree you'd have when you don't do a degree, but it's still an undegree. Yeah, I think I like that. I like that. Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I encourage people to have a look at that, definitely. And so we'll share all your links in the show notes. And I appreciate you. We've spent quite a bit of time together this morning, and it's time for me to go and have a coffee, and it's time for you to start chilling out because it's evening in Canada. But thank you so much. Oh
My
my
pleasure.
gosh, you've been so generous and such a
My
great sport.
pleasure.
And we've actually perfected our inverted commas
Yes.
during this. Yeah.
We're
Oh,
excellent
I
at
love your
it.
work.
Yeah.
Yes, and we're going to have you on the show again really soon because I do want to talk to you about neurodivergency.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
it's something I'm really want to know about because I'm not the only teacher. I'm sure that we are dealing with these students in our teaching studios more than ever, I believe, and we need to be informed.
Hmm.
So thank you. Go and enjoy your evening. I'm going to enjoy
Thanks,
my
Rob.
cup of coffee and I look forward to talking to you really soon. Thank you, Shannon.
Perfect. Take care.
Bye.